More often than not, video games that propose a vast open world to explore and discover are set on islands. From your Pokemon regions to your GTA-style sandboxes to even the new release Mario Kart world, many are the open worlds that are either one big island or a collection of smaller isles. The quick explanation on why this is the case is simple. An island clearly indicates the limits of the digital world, thus removing the need for invisible walls. And while sure, this justification does check out, I would not make this video if there was not more to it. What are the design choices that come to play when designing an island open world, and how do various developers make the best out of this setting? First things first, roll the intro. Even if only 9% of the population lives on islands, as the making of this video myself included, they seem to be very much more common in gaming. I could list 1,000 open world games that are entirely surrounded by sea, from Just Cause to Sleeping Dogs to Far Cry to Animal Crossing, and I would still have plenty of room to spare. Of course, not all games are set on virtual archipelago. Zelda Breath of the Wild, The Witcher and Sunset Overdrive chose a more continental setting, yet islands are fairly common in gaming, more than real life. Originally, I wanted to make a biome-like video for islands in games, but I soon realized that most games are already set on islands anyways. It would have been forced to link all these games together under one umbrella. But why are most open worlds surrounded by sea in the first place? As stated, the practical reason is not complex. An island clearly indicates where the explorable world ends. Sure, a mountain chain could do the same trick, but having mountains that you can climb next to mountains you can't feels disingenuous. A body of water that clearly demarks the boundaries of the world feels much more natural, an elegant solution. You can even say that the game world is isolated. Having said that, we no longer live in the PS2 era where swimming mechanics were rarer than diamonds. Visually, all free-roaming games do have ways to sail or swim away from the coast, yet no matter how much you try to navigate beyond the horizon, there will be something that will stop you right on your tracks. Even Lakitu has its limits. It is clear that in modern gaming, players have more tools to navigate the world, mechanics that will allow players to overcome the old fear of water and attempt the great escape over the map limit. And yet, despite this, many developers still choose islands as their setting of choice. So the previous answer does not explain the full story. We still do not know why islands are so popular in game design. Beyond the sandbox border, I believe the reasons why islands are common are many, reasons that can be grouped into three major arguments: adjustment of scale, theme of isolation of setting, and the greater freedom in game design. Starting off with the former reason, if a world is placed within a continent not explorable by the player, the developers need to make a surrounding false world visually appealing not to break the illusion. It can be quite frustrating to roam the streets of a city just to arbitrarily find out that some streets cannot be crossed, despite seeing the rest of the world. An island of course does not have this problem. It is quite visually clear where the developers intend to keep the action of the game and where this action meets its bounds. When you boot up Wii Sports Resort and play across the beautiful Wuhu Island, the world does not appear small or limited, rather it feels just the right size, especially because it is not attached to a greater landmass. There is never a sense of it could have been more, like there is for games like Fallout, where the limits of the worlds are arbitrary lines on a map. And speaking of border regions, if an explorable land is attached to a continent, the developers often need to give the greater landmass some meaning and lore. Skyrim is a province of the Tamriel continent, meaning that the game has to somewhat explain what is going on in the rest of the universe to a believable extent. Nothing happens in a vacuum in an interconnected Pangaea. It would feel disingenuous to say otherwise, but an island? That one can truly be, well, isolated. An island does not need to be placed within a greater context. Why is everything diverse and mysterious in Koholint Island, found in Zelda's Link's Awakening? Who knows, but since it is a lost island in the middle of the sea, if it exists at all, it needs no content to function narratively. The freedom when designing an island rather than a country within an already existing landmass is unmatched. There are no restrictions on how big the island can be, if it is surrounded by additional islands, how can it be explored by the player, and how much of it is uncharted. And speaking of discovery, islands do also have an aura of mystery and exploration, a land that awaits to be searched by new upcoming players. A title like Far Cry 3, the tropical rock islands serve perfectly the narration and the gameplay. The player is quite literally trapped in these great atolls, but such an environment is perfect to start a guerrilla uprising. In Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, the player roams the 7 seas in search of islands, discovered or otherwise, and in Crisis, every inch of Linshan Island is filled with soldiers ready to fight you. You get the gist. Since an island has a determined perimeter and it is detached from the world, they can evoke a sense of discovery and mysticism like no other landmass could. The last reason why I think this setting is so popular is the freedom islands give in game design. I believe that, perhaps a bit counterintuitively, an island environment gives more freedom in world building than a landmass. When the limits of the map are cut and clear, such can be the case in the Yakuza franchise, the story and the gameplay cannot demand the protagonist to move 2 blocks past the edge of the world to achieve a specific purpose, making the game by choice limited in its reach. An island, on the other hand, can be fully explorable, since the limits of the world is the water around the landmass. This water is still a limit, of course, but what is within the isle can be truly molded to the developer's desire, allowing them to play how they wish inland without worrying the player might reach too far. In the charming indie title A Short Hike, Hawkpeak Island is the perfect location to free roam and discover all the different colorful characters. Since the objective of the game is to climb up the mountain in the middle of the isle, it makes sense to have all the side quests and collectibles scattered across the circular perimeter, with the limits of the world being water rather than more mountains. It is quite clear now how islands showcase these 3 attributes introduced earlier: the adjustment of scale, the freedom of isolation of setting, and a greater freedom in game design. However, as every decision made, there are some inevitable drawbacks when choosing not to go inland, both technical as well as narrative. From a technical point of view, a developer has a harder time to expand the explorable world with additional DLCs, without resorting to, well, adding another island. This was not too big of a concern when expansions and downloadable content was rare, but now it's a concern worth waiting. If Mario Kart World ever gets additional tracks like we are all hoping for, they will probably come in the form of a mini island located next to the major continent. This is not bad per se, but it will make the interconnectivity between the existing tracks and the newer ones a bit awkward. That was the case with Just Cause 3, where one of the DLCs added the small island of Lacrima in a spot where there was MTC before. The addition was welcome, but it felt underwhelming just to add a small island next to the Greater Medici, as if it was brute force in the already crafted open world. Of course, nothing stops Nintendo to simply upscale their island and add new subregions, but that would definitely feel intrusive to the original design, one that players came to know and now love, not to mention quite a technical challenge. As far as I'm aware, the sole game that managed to upscale the already existing world is Truck Simulator, but that game has a very specific geometry. In general, an island cannot be expanded so easily as a landmass can. Geralt has no difficulties in riding his horse all the way to Tucson, but it would feel a bit disingenuous if a new island near Skellige would just pop up from nowhere and somehow also have deep lore interconnected with the rest of the world. The same can be said for sequels, by the way. Island hopping between different games can work up to a certain extent. The problem is not to set a sequel on the same island. If anything, in a previous video I argued that developers should recycle their open worlds more often, bringing positive examples, but rather that the world building of an existing island can be hardly expanded. Despite these drawbacks, however, it is quite clear that island worlds are still preferred by developers. It could just be the force of habit. This is just how video games were developed and will be developed for the years to come. But after dissecting and studying up closely what makes islands so ideal for environments, I believe the invisible wall excuse is far from the sole reason. Islands in video games are here to stay, and hey, who am I to complain about it while flying across the skies of Los Santos or driving endlessly across Solis? It is not possible to generalize this environment due to the very different variations it has across games, but it is possible to appreciate all islands present in games specifically for the one aspect that groups them all. If someone wants to draw an archipelago composed of all islands present in the gaming world, such a cartographical map would extend miles upon miles of paper. The islands present in the gaming world are myriads, in an always expanding list. Designing a world within an island has its advantages, and no wonder why so many developers choose isles over continents. From a design perspective, it makes sense to condense the action in a clearly demarked area, isolated from a greater world. It is not always the best solution, but more often than not, an island is just the right setting for your next adventure. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many islands times for watching today's video. This was a bit of a short one, but I really wanted to talk about this curious pattern in video games, especially after exploring Wuhu Island in a previous video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Until next time, arrivederci.